In early June 1944, within the heavily fortified bunker complex of the Fremdheer West headquarters at Germany, Colonel Alexis von Rohen finalized an intelligence assessment that would ultimately seal the fate of the Third Reich. As the head of the department responsible for analyzing the military capabilities of the Western Allies, von Rohen held a position of immense influence within the German military hierarchy, acting as the primary filter for all intelligence regarding the looming invasion of Europe. His report, submitted to the Wehrmacht High Command, contained a singular section that stopped every reader cold and sent ripples of anxiety through the highest levels of the Nazi leadership. The assessment claimed, with absolute certainty, that the Allies possessed roughly 89 combat-ready divisions stationed in Britain, poised to strike across the English Channel. This staggering figure had been verified through what appeared to be an unimpeachable triangulation of intelligence sources, rigorous radio intercepts, detailed aerial reconnaissance photographs, and confidential reports from Germany's most trusted network of secret agents operating within the United Kingdom. To the German commanders reading the report, the conclusion was terrifyingly clear. The enemy possessed an overwhelming numerical advantage that threatened to crush German defenses through sheer weight of manpower and machinery. The only problem with this documented assessment was that it was almost entirely a fabrication. In reality, the Allies had roughly 40 operational divisions in Britain, not 89. The disparity represented one of the greatest conjuring tricks in military history. The remaining divisions were ghosts, phantom formations that existed only on paper, in the airwaves, and in the carefully scripted lies of double agents. These were entire armies, complete with fictitious commanders, imaginary headquarters, non-existent signals, traffic, and complex supply chains that led nowhere. Through a masterfully orchestrated campaign of deception, British intelligence had convinced the most sophisticated military and analysts in Europe that these phantom formations posed a simultaneous and existential threat to Norway, the Pas-de-Calais, and the Mediterranean. When the actual invasion finally materialized on the beaches of Normandy on June 6, 1944, German commanders, paralyzed by the fear of these ghost armies, held their powerful reserves in check for weeks, waiting for an invasion force that would never arrive. The deception was so absolute, so complete in its execution, that even after the war had ended and the ruins of Germany were being cleared, many Wehrmacht officers refused to believe they had been so thoroughly fooled by armies made of air. To understand how such a colossal deception was possible, one must understand the desperate strategic position of Germany. By late 1943, the Third Reich faced the inevitability of an Allied invasion of Western Europe. The question was no longer if the blow would fall, but where and when. Adolf Hitler and his commanders knew the Allies were massing forces in Britain, transforming the island into a massive staging ground. For German intelligence, the imperative was to determine the invasion's timing, location, and strength with precision. If they could correctly predict the landing site, Germany could concentrate its formidable armored reserves and infantry at the point of impact, potentially throwing the invasion force back into the sea and buying the Reich crucial time. However, if they guessed wrong, committing their reserves to the wrong sector, while the true invasion established a foothold elsewhere, the war would effectively be lost. This high-stakes environment was complicated by the fractured nature of the German intelligence apparatus. The Abwehr, the military intelligence service under Admiral Wilhelm Knappes, ran espionage operations abroad but was riddled with internal dissent. The SD, the Nazi Party's intelligence service, under Walter Schellenberg, constantly competed for resources and influence, often prioritizing political maneuvering over military utility. Amidst this bureaucratic infighting stood Colonel von Rohen's Fremdheer West, tasked with synthesizing these contradictory streams of information into a coherent picture of the enemy. Von Rohen's staff of approximately analysts at Zossen processed a relentless torrent of data, handling thousands of intelligence reports every month. They scrutinized radio intercepts from Luftwaffe signals intelligence, analyzed aerial reconnaissance photographs snapped during rare German sorties over British airspace, and pored over agent reports supposedly originating from the Abwehr network in Britain. They cross-referenced these findings with prisoner interrogations from captured Allied airmen and sailors and coastal observer reports from occupied France. By the spring of 1944, FHW believed they had constructed a comprehensive and accurate order of battle for the Allied forces. Their maps showed division, locations, corps assignments, army group structures, and equipment strengths. They tracked 50 Allied divisions preparing for operations, identifying major concentrations in Scotland, southeast England, and southwest England. They predicted invasion timing based on weather patterns, tide tables, and logistical readiness. Everything appeared thoroughly documented and cross-verified through multiple independent sources. Yet, this picture was a work of fiction, a cathedral of deceit built by the Allies to exploit the very thoroughness of German analysis. The Allies understood that their survival depended on this fiction. General Dwight D. Eisenhower, the supreme Allied commander, later wrote that the success or failure of the invasion would be determined in the first 48 hours after landing. The logistics of the Channel crossing meant that the Allies were at their most vulnerable during the initial assault. If German reserves arrived quickly, they could overwhelm the beachhead before heavy equipment and sufficient troops could be landed. The geography of the defense favored the Germans. Reinforcements from the Pas-de-Calais region could reach Normandy in 12 hours. From Norway, movement would take 3 days. From southern France, 4 to 5 days through constant air attacks. Every hour that German forces remained frozen in the wrong position multiplied the Allied chances of survival. Eisenhower told his staff that he needed just 2 days 48 hours where German reserves stayed paralyzed. British intelligence, through the architecture of Operation Bodyguard, would deliver not just 2 days, but nearly 7 weeks of hesitation. Operation Bodyguard, approved at the Tehran Conference in December 1943 by Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin, was the overarching deception plan for the 1944 invasion season. The name was derived from a remark by Churchill to Stalin, in wartime, "Truth is so precious that she should always be attended by a bodyguard of lies." The strategy was not a single ruse but a complex web of connected operations designed to force German intelligence to track multiple threats simultaneously. The genius of the plan lay in its exploitation of German expectations. Hitler had long planned Operation Sea Lion, the invasion of Britain, using the Dover to Calais route, the shortest channel crossing, and the most obvious approach. British planners assumed that Hitler would expect the Allies to follow the same logic. They were correct. Intercepted communications revealed that Hitler expected diversionary actions in Norway, Denmark, and the Mediterranean, with the main thrust coming at the Pas-de-Calais. The deception plan simply needed to confirm the fears that already existed in the Führer's mind. 3 primary operations formed the core of this strategy. Fortitude North targeted Norway, threatening an invasion from Scotland. Fortitude South targeted the Pas-de-Calais, threatening an invasion from southeast England. Operation Zeppelin targeted the Mediterranean and Balkans, threatening the southern flank of Europe. Each of these operations required the creation of phantom armies, fake radio traffic, double agents, and physical deception assets. Fortitude North began in earnest on March 22, 1944, with the creation of the fictitious British Fourth Army, ostensibly headquartered at Edinburgh Castle. The choice of commander for this ghost army was critical. General Sir Andrew Thorne. Thorne had served as a British military attaché in Berlin before the war, and was personally known to many senior German officers. When German intelligence detected signals emanating from Edinburgh, under Thorne's command, they accepted the formation's existence without question, believing that an officer of his stature would never be assigned to command a fake unit. The Phantom Fourth Army was composed of 2 corps, the 2nd British Corps and the 7th Corps. These formations mixed real units, such as the 52nd Lowland Division and the 3rd Infantry Division, with completely fictional ones like the 58th, 55th, and 61st Infantry Divisions. On paper, the Fourth Army commanded 250,000 troops massed in Scotland and northern England, preparing for Operation Sky, the invasion of Norway. To make this credible, the deception required meticulous attention to detail. Phantom divisions needed signal traffic patterns that matched real formations. British and Canadian signals units operated from bases across Scotland, transmitting thousands of messages between fictional headquarters. They simulated routine administrative traffic, supply requisitions, personnel movements, and training schedules. Radio operators were trained to mimic the unique fist, the transmitting style of individual signalmen, ensuring that German intercept stations logged distinct personalities and units. Physical deception supported this electronic web. Dummy landing craft appeared in Scottish ports, and the fictional 55th Division generated enough activity in Northern Ireland to alarm Irish intelligence, whose reports were duly forwarded to Berlin by German agents in Dublin. The strategic goal of Fortitude North was to tie down the massive German garrison in Norway. By April 1944, Germany maintained 13 army divisions in Norway, along with 168,000 support personnel and substantial naval and air assets, totaling roughly 300,000 troops. Hitler considered Norway a zone of destiny, vital for protecting iron ore shipments from Sweden and providing bases for British intelligence ensured he remained fixated on this northern flank, preventing these 300,000 troops from reinforcing the Atlantic Wall in France. However, the masterpiece of the deception was Fortitude South. This operation created the first United States Army Group, FUSE, a massive force ostensibly commanded by General George S. Patton. German intelligence regarded Patton as the Allies' most formidable commander, a genius of tank warfare who was aggressive and unpredictable. When reports placed Patton in command of a massive force in southeast England, directly opposite the Pas-de-Calais, German analysts drew the obvious conclusion: wherever Patton was, the main invasion would follow. FUSAG was depicted as a colossal force, consisting of 12 divisions organized into 2 armies. The fictional U.S. 14th Army alone contained 8 divisions, Combined with real units awaiting deployment, German intelligence believed Fusag commanded over 1 million men, the largest Allied concentration in Britain. To sell this lie, the Allies launched Operation Quicksilver, a massive physical deception effort. Dummy equipment was deployed across Kent, Sussex, and Essex. This included 255 fake landing craft known as Big Bobs, which filled harbors from Folkestone to Great Yarmouth. These structures were made of canvas stretched over scaffolding frames and floated on oil drums. They were fragile and difficult to manage. Strong winds frequently capsized them, necessitating a dedicated regiment on standby to right the overturned dummies before German reconnaissance flights could spot the deception. Inland fields were filled with inflatable Sherman tanks manufactured by the U.S. Rubber Company, weighing just 93 pounds. These tanks could be inflated in 20 minutes and looked convincing from the altitude of a reconnaissance plane. They were moved periodically to suggest active training rotations and then hidden in warehouses to simulate embarkation preparations. While the physical deception provided visual evidence, the radio traffic and agent reports did the heavy lifting. British signals units transmitted thousands of messages daily from the tunnels of Dover Castle, creating the electronic signature of a massive army preparing for war. An 8-inch thick script book governed every transmission, ensuring that orders for phantom supply movements, requests for replacement equipment, and training schedules appeared authentic enough to pass German analysis. Yet, the most potent weapon in the Allied arsenal was the double-cross system. By 19, MI5 had successfully identified and turned or captured every German spy operating in the United Kingdom. Through the 20 Committee, they controlled the flow of information to Berlin, feeding the Abwehr a carefully curated mixture of truth and fiction. The star of this network was Juan Pujol Garcia, codenamed Garbo, a Spaniard who despised fascism. Garbo had created a fictitious network of 27 subagents, none of whom existed. Operating from a safe house in London, he and his handler, Thomas Harris, composed detailed reports from a Venezuelan businessman in Glasgow, an indiscreet U.S. Army sergeant, a Welsh fascist, and others. Garbo's reports were so convincing that the Germans paid him enormous sums of money and relied on his intelligence for strategic planning. He was supported by other double agents, such as Roman Chernyavsky, codenamed Brutus, a Polish officer who had been turned by the Germans and then turned back by the British, and Dusko Popov, codenamed Tricycle, a Yugoslav playboy who fed disinformation to the Obs. This network created a cascading confirmation effect. When Garbo reported the existence of FUSAG in southeast England, Brutus confirmed it through independent military channels. When Brutus described the Fourth Army in Scotland, other agents provided corroborating details about training exercises. German intelligence received the same false information from multiple apparently unconnected sources, leading them to conclude it must be accurate. They never suspected that the entire network was a puppet show directed by MI5. By late May 1944, Colonel von Rohen's assessments, based on this corrupted data, presented a picture of Allied strength that was almost entirely fictional. His report on May 19 documented 79 Allied divisions in Britain, with the main concentration under Patton in the southeast. This assessment reached Hitler, who told his commanders on June 4 that the Allied strength exceeded 80 divisions and that the main attack would target the Pas-de-Calais. He believed that any landing in Normandy would be a diversion designed to draw German reserves away from the real target. This belief was the linchpin of the Allied strategy. When D-Day arrived on the morning of June 6, 1944, the deception yielded immediate and catastrophic results for the German defense. As Allied forces stormed 5 beaches under heavy fire, German high command hesitated. Hitler slept through the morning, his staff afraid to wake him. When he finally awoke, he refused to release the strategic panzer reserves. Believing the Normandy landings were a feint, the critical 12th SS Panzer Division and the Panzer Lehr Division, 2 elite armored formations positioned within striking distance of the beaches, sat immobile for the entire day. Had they been released immediately, they could have reached the coast by the evening of June 6, potentially throwing the fragile Allied beachheads into chaos. Instead, they waited for orders that came too late. By the time they began to move, Allied air supremacy made daytime travel suicidal, forcing them to crawl toward the front under the cover of darkness, arriving piecemeal and exhausted. But the true success of the deception became apparent in the days following the invasion. On June 9, 3 days after the landings, Garbo sent a critical message to his handlers. He reported that his agents had confirmed that FUSAG had not moved from southeast England. He argued that the Normandy invasion involved only a fraction of the Allied forces and that the main blow was still to come at the Pas-de-Calais. The German response to this message was immediate. They swallowed the lie whole. Hitler cancelled orders, sending units from the 15th Army to reinforce Normandy. Divisions that were actually on the road, such as the 16th Luftwaffe Field Division, were turned around and sent back to wait for Patton. For the next 7 weeks, the 15th Army, consisting of 19 divisions and over 150,000 combat troops, sat idle at the Pas-de-Calais, guarding against an invasion that would never happen. These forces outnumbered the German 7th Army, fighting in Normandy. If even half of them had been redeployed in the first week, the battle for Normandy might have ended in an Allied defeat. Instead, they remained frozen by the threat of a phantom army. General von Salmuth, commanding the 15th Army, repeatedly requested permission to send reinforcements to the crumbling Normandy front, but was denied every time. The shadow of Patton's Fusag loomed larger than the reality of the fighting in the HEDGEROWS. The deception held until late July. By the time German command finally realized the truth and began moving the 15th Army to Normandy, the battle was already lost. Allied forces had captured Cherbourg, broken out of the beachhead during Operation Cobra, and were encircling the German forces in the Falaz pocket. The divisions from the Pas-de-Calais arrived too late to alter the outcome, often being thrown into the encirclement to be destroyed without having fought a meaningful engagement. The delay had been fatal. Eisenhower had asked for 48 hours. Operation Fortitude gave him 7 weeks. The mathematics of the deception were brutal for Germany. They had defended empty coastlines against radio signals and inflatable tanks while losing the decisive battle of the war. The scale of the success was acknowledged by both sides, albeit in very different ways. In July 1944, Hitler awarded Garbo the Iron Cross for his extraordinary merit in providing intelligence, while later that year, King George VI appointed him a member of the Order of the British Empire. Garbo remains the only person in history to receive both decorations for the same actions in the same war. The phantom armies of Operation Fortitude demonstrated that in modern warfare, information superiority could be as lethal as firepower. British intelligence had not just hidden the truth, they had constructed an alternate reality that the German High Command was all too willing to inhabit. Von Roen's detailed maps, the thousands of intercepted radio messages, and the reports from trusted agents were all part of a grand illusion. The 89 divisions that terrified the Wehrmacht were a myth, but their impact on the war was as real as the steel and fire on Omaha Beach. The ghost armies never fired a shot, yet they won one of the most critical victories of World War II, ensuring that the liberation of Europe could succeed.